afternoon. So we're going to get started. We have lots to cover. We're excited to talk about it. Thank you for coming to this talk on secure identity infrastructure. We're delighted that you're here. My name is Alex Weinert. I run the identity protection team for Microsoft. So we are responsible for ensuring that every login is a safe login. So fundamentally, I'm the group program manager. So along with my counterpart, who's in the engineering manager, we are focused on making sure that we don't have unauthorized access into any of our consumer or enterprise systems. And totals out to about 4.7 billion users and about 18 billion logins a day. So we do a fair amount of activity. And one of the things that we see in our system is that the attack rates right now are up about 300%. That's year over year. It's actually better than last year. Last year, there was an order of magnitude growth. So we jumped to an order of magnitude, and then we went 3x more this year. So it's quite a significant attack rate increase. The threat is out there. Now our actual compromise rates are down, so we're winning on that side. But we do see the attackers are very active. And so we have an opportunity here, and I'm very happy to have this, that someone that many of you know and trust, and who's a great advocate for the customer view and an expert in identity systems. And we wanted to give Martin Kuppinger a chance to give you his insights on what a secure identity infrastructure, what kind of the core elements and the way to think about it were. And then I'll come in afterwards and show you, for those of you who are Azure Active Directory or Microsoft 365 customers, some of the ways that our things relate to that. So please join me in welcoming Martin Kuppinger.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex, and welcome to the audience. Secure identity, or identity as part of security, is a very big topic. So we probably easily could spend a couple of hours with only touching the most important things. So what I want to do is, in the next round about 20 minutes, is I'd like to focus on some of the key trends, key patterns, key practices, the things we see are about to change, or where we have some focus shift in the way we deal with identity, with access, which is not a complete coverage of everything which is going on, but really more a focus on certain patterns and practices for securing your identity infrastructure. I want to start with a very high-level perspective on that. And I think our challenge to some extent starts with the fact that we are sort of hyper-connected. So in this age of digital transformation, everything and everyone become connected, which means we need to deal with far more identities than ever before. And when you look at the number Alex just brought up, with 4.7 billion accounts they have to deal at Microsoft alone, and when you don't think about things and devices which add to that, then I think it becomes very obvious there's far more communication, far more connections, and in consequence there's also far more risk, because there are more points, more attack vectors, more potential targets, more things that can go wrong. And so we need to understand how do we deal with that. And when we look at this, so the biggest change in security thinking, which also affects identity thinking, or which involves identity, is around this zero trust notion. I don't say zero trust network, because I believe the term zero trust network is fundamentally misleading. I'll touch it in a minute. It's about zero trust identity, zero trust in various areas, not only at the network level. And also zero trust is a term we need to be a little bit careful with, because it doesn't mean we don't trust anything. At some point we need to say, okay, we have enough trust in our decision to allow someone to access the system. So at some point we end up with some trust, but it's not about blindly trusting a single device. It's about knowing which combination of systems to trust, when to verify, to make a good decision. So zero trust is a concept. It is very much about avoiding lateral movement. So lateral movement means, for instance, someone is coming in, passing the firewall, and then he has free choice of accessing every system and can move laterally through the entire environment. We need to protect this, Also in these days where everything is connected, where it's not about we have a perimeter in the firewall and everyone is coming in there. So basically there are certain things we need to keep in mind. It's not a single technology. So if someone tries to sell you a zero trust solution or a zero trust tool, then you better walk off and go to the next vendor, because there's no such thing as a zero trust tool, a single one. It's always a combination of a lot of things. It's a concept. And it's not a VPN modernization or things like that. So basically, it's about verifying once somewhere, or not about verifying, that's the correct way, not about verifying once somewhere and then trust. That was the old notion, firewall, you're in and then you can do what you want. But it's sort of moving to never trust and always verify. So be careful with trust. So as I've said, at some point you trust. So don't trust only the firewall. Don't trust only the endpoint authentication. So someone authenticated with his mobile device. Don't trust only the mobile device itself, but verify again and again. Build your final or make your final decision based on a lot of factors and a current proof, so that you're at least significantly more secure than you're in a traditional environment. That's the only way I think we need to deal. So the zero trust idea basically is a great idea. It's not super new, because at the end we did a lot of this stuff already. But I think it's a logical sort of next step when we accept, okay, so this traditional perimeter thinking, the firewall is dead or things like that are true. And within the zero trust notion, the device, the identity, the context are at the core. But at the end, there's a lot of identity, and there must be a lot of identity in this concept, because at the end, what we want to do with everything we do in security, or with most we do in security, at the end, it's always about saying, okay, I allow someone access to something, or I don't allow it, I don't permit it. And I think this is basically what all this is about. At the end, all we are doing is about saying, okay, Martin is allowed to do that, or Martin is not allowed to do that. And so what we need to do is we need to do a continuous verification of authentication. So not logging in once and then leaving the person in for the next 24 hours, but checking this in whichever way, as seamless as we can do, more constantly. Re-evaluating a risk score. So does this risk score change? So if Martin came in from Germany and the next access happens from an IP address, let's say in China, then we should change our risk score, obviously. And there are many factors to consider. The device, so is it a secure device? We know very well, is it a new device? Is there a first access from a different device, geolocation, etc.? And all these contribute to the decisions we make. So it's about the user, understanding the user, having the identity governance, is this a current account, etc. Multi-factor authentication, behavioral analytics, so is this user behaving the same way he always did? Adaptive authentication, I'll touch this in a minute. So you can see, well, I can't see at the bottom. Theoretically, you could see my agenda at the bottom, but it's hidden here. Anyway, so adaptive authentication, then we have the device, we need the device identity, we need an endpoint protection, we need privilege management, who's allowed to do what on the device, local accounts on the device, so local administrative accounts, etc. And we need a context, so we need to understand the geographical context, etc. And bringing all this together in our decision making is the essential thing. And having done tools, and that is something Alex will touch in a few minutes, also tools which help in that by identifying where are things going wrong, where are the threats, where are potential threats. Also at the back end is, from my perspective, super important to get better in this and not to trust a single entity, a single tool anymore, but to build our security on a broad variety of as up-to-date information as we can have. So another thing which comes into this entire story of where is identity and where's authentication heading is the way we authenticate. So if we are realistic, so, okay, when we use our smartphone, probably most of the stuff we do is using a fingerprint or face recognition or something like that. But in our daily life, we still use a mass of username password combinations. Sometimes we only use one, that's even worse. But we also are regularly confronted with businesses which only accept username password, or which say, okay, you can use username password, maybe you can use your Facebook account. I don't have one, so I'm back to username password in that case, and that's it. I think the entire story around how do we need to proceed with authentication starts on one hand from the security end, so how can we do it better from that perspective? On the other hand, maybe even more important, from the business perspective. So how do we sort of satisfy the customer, the consumer, the user? And we need to change our focus away from what do we want as a business so from an inside-out thinking to an outside-in thinking. So what currently most frequently happens when we look at not only authentication, but registration workflows and a lot of other stuff is the business looks at the consumer and says, okay, what works best for us? Which PII do we want to collect, regardless of we need it or not? What is the way of authentication that works well with our systems? Which registration processes work well for us? Frequently, they not even really think about it. They just implement something. And the consumer has to do it or not. So do what we want you to do. I don't believe that this is a good attitude to deal with your consumers and customers. So we should change that perspective to an outside-in perspective. The consumer, obviously in the age of GDPR, has far more right than ever before to control which data is collected and what happens with that. That will get even more challenging with the e-privacy directive. The user has some way of authentication he prefers. And that way might be very different depending on the device he's using, etc. And it will change over time because who of us knows what is the hype device in 3 years from now? What is the standard way of authentication in 3 years from now? We don't know. The only thing I'm pretty sure about is there will be change. And then our consumer, our customer wants to do it differently. So we need to think about how can we do what they want to do and combine that and balance that with our security requirements. So flexible authentication, but yet secure. Get rid of the password and ideally be even more secure than you have been before. So being more secure than the password is not that difficult. So you really should take the perspective of the customer, look for convenient ways for a choice of devices. That is what you need to do. Adapt to your customer and then balance that with your security requirements, which requires a different way of thinking and how you deal with authentication and all that stuff. And there will be a lot of insight in how you can do that delivered by Alex in a few minutes from now. And one of the important things, and I had a couple of discussions with end-user organizations around that, is don't always try to do everything yourself. So if you use an external identity provider, if you use a login via a social network, it doesn't mean that you lose your customer record. So you have a customer or consumer. They use an authenticator. That might be something on the device, that might be username, password on the browser, whatever else. For an account, which might be some public account or your internal account. Around this account, there's some information you might access or not, you might allow to access or not. And then he accesses your backend applications, which are hosted internally or which are hosted in the cloud, whatever else. And that is where he then, for instance, integrates with the CRM where the customer record resides. And that customer record is totally independent of what you're doing here. So, and you might use that information then again in a very different way. The important thing is here, it's not that you need to solve all around authentication, all around protecting your identity yourself. You can use different things. You just need to understand what is more secure, what is less secure, what you're doing. From there, it is then a very short step in this adaptive authentication journey towards allowing your users, be it employees, be it business partners, be it customers or consumers, to use different types of authenticators, where we have these 3 different factors, basically. So something you have, something you know, something you are, which leads to different types of, different variants of technology. You have here so mobile plus PIN, mobile plus biometrics, whatever, knowledge-based authentication. What will help us to do a lot of things better here is still rather new standard, but with a pretty high momentum in the market, which is the FIDO Alliance standards, which allow us to use device authentication, such as the device biometrics, and pass that in a standardized way to the backend systems. And this is, I think, a super smart thing, because we then really can build on all these integrated biometrics, etc., and understand the level of assurance we get from that, and build our flexibility, because by building on such standards, so if we say we have a standard between here's the authentication mechanisms, fingerprint, face recognition, etc., and here's the backend system, and in between we have a standard for communication, that means we can support all the specifics of all these various devices in an elegant way, and we really move towards adaptive authentication. And adaptive authentication, from my perspective, has 2 facets. The one facet is the adaptiveness for the authenticator. So we should be able to support whichever authenticator, from username, passwords to biometrics to whatever else, someone wants to use. As long, and that's the other part of the adaptiveness, as long as it meets our security requirements. So you could think in a risk score, so to speak. So is the level of assurance, the authentication strength, good enough to what we need to do? And for some use cases, it might be very low. For some use cases, we might to adapt what we need in a level of assurance. So if you do and a lot of you probably know it these days from the banking, after this new PSD2 standard came up, I think, 1.5 years ago. PSD2, in fact, has one element in which says you don't need a 2-factor authentication or a strong authentication for transactions below 30 euros, which leads to many scenarios where you don't need a PIN for your credit card anymore if the amount is below 30 euros. And that is, in fact, a perfect example for adaptiveness. So if the risk is too big, you need a better authentication. You need to enter your PIN. Not really good, but at least better than no PIN. So FIDO standards are really allowing us to standardize also the registration and the authentication process, so the login. The registration piece is of particular interest because it also means that you have a simplified registration. That's basically you once register a device, and then you can use the subsequent login. And it's supported by a lot of companies in a lot of tools. So it's Microsoft, it's Google, and it are many, many others. It's supported natively in a lot of environments, in browsers, in operating systems. So this helps us to get better in the authentication, the identity assurance part. And in consequence, when we look at what is happening around authentication, so on one hand, the demand, we need to support new types of devices, we need to get better, we need to get more flexible. And on the other hand, so this need of security, then we also see in the advisory we do and the customers we talk with, we see a shift from sort of going beyond the traditional identity and access management, so which is a lot of identity provisioning, so creating accounts, etc., and doing some access review towards really managing the access of all users at every time. So to speak, a shift from, you could call it deploy time, so you have an access request and approval, and you grant some entitlements, towards the runtime identity management. So authentication, should that happen in that context? Authorization based on the entitlements, understanding what is really happening. Is this what, so user behavior analytics, is this really what should happen? And analyzing, is there something going wrong? And clearly it depends a little on the use case. So if you have more of an employee focus, it's probably more at the end of managing entitlements. The more mobile the people get, the more you are working with externals, the more you need this increased flexibility. And you need to do that not only for web access traditionally. I'll touch this slide more in detail on with my next slide. But basically, we need also to support not only our traditional HTTP-based access. So someone is accessing a website, entering his credentials, things like that. So the traditional web access. But we also need to support API-based access. So more and more of what we are doing is happening in the background. So I authenticate to my iPhone, and then there's an app, and this app is communicating via certain types of APIs with the backend. We need to support that, and this is another important thing. We need to add capabilities of API security, of API monitoring, etc., to what we are doing here. And finally, that is a way of thinking. When we look at patterns and practices, we see more and more of how can we really connect all these users. So from the employee which is working on site to the consumer, how can we connect all of these to all of these target systems which can be public cloud or private cloud, which might support federation or not, down to the legacy apps. And basically, that is what we need to get a grip on. So how can we sort of support this journey of the user from here's the user, here's the application, to how can he seamlessly access everything he needs to access in a secure manner. What we see as a strong tendency in the patterns is moving towards something which you could call an identity fabric or an identity broker. So where you say, okay, I have various types of IDPs. That might be some external ones, that might be identity API platforms I built myself. And this identity fabric then supports the federation from the external IDPs. It supports the direct authentication. It delivers auditing and reporting capabilities, access back to the old stuff. And it also manages other capabilities, such as API security, provisioning of users in cloud services, consent privacy, down to things like the authorization, the policies. So not only reporting, but also policy-based authentication. Who's allowed to access what? And from a logical perspective, and this is more a logical architecture as I've written down there. From a logical perspective, this is a very common pattern right now in the thinking of where organizations are moving. Really saying, I get rid of many of having many tools here, a little bit of authentication for employees, here for my customers, and here I do that, and here I have an old web access management, towards unified platforms which help me to connect everything from the one end to the other end. Things like, when you think of the Microsoft world, you probably end up very quickly with, if I look at Azure AD with all its parts like B2B, B2C, then I'm pretty close to that logical architecture. So these are some of the, as I've said, some of the patterns and practices we observe. Some things you might consider in your thinking when you think about how to deal with identity, with authentication, with authorization, and all that stuff. And finally, to increase the level of security you have. And from my perspective, at the core of security, it's really the identity, because at the end, it's about who has access to what. With that, I'm done with my part. I'll hand it back to Alex. Alex, it's your turn.
Thank you, Martin. Thanks very much. Please give Martin a hand. All right, I'm going to do the quick drink of water thing, which if you pay any attention to American politics, you know is very dangerous to do on stage. Briefly, again, our team, the identity protection team, is responsible for protecting accounts, whether those are Office 365 accounts attached to any third party, your Skype account, your Xbox account, if you play Xbox. Regardless of what it is, it's our job to try to keep it safe. And so most of what I'll be talking about here is really derivative of the work that we do in that space and how we see customers succeeding in applying these, and also some new technologies we're bringing out to respond to some of the threats that we've been seeing. Just so we know who we are, this is a great group of people at Ignite. If you are an Office 365 user, right? If your organization does that, great. And then if you are separately using features from Azure Active Directory, awesome, okay. Conditional access, okay, this is good. Now, if at least some of the users in your organizations are covered by multi-factor auth, Oh, I'm so happy. Okay, great. This is wonderful news. This is something we've been trying very hard to get people to adopt. So it's good to know who we are, and so I can calibrate. If you have any questions or roadmap questions or anything like that after, I'm happy to stay as long as you like after the session. If you want to go past, say, 6:30, it'll require beers, but that's okay. All right, so moving on, when we look at the things that Martin said, right, and I obviously got to see the slides ahead of time, there's two things that I wanted to talk to that were thematic in what Martin was saying. And the first is around this idea of adaptive standards-based access, right? We want to have strong credentials, and then we actually want to adapt the user experience based on what we're doing. And so I want to start off by talking about this. Okay, less happy questions. If your organization still has a complexity policy, like uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and letters, okay. If your organization still has a password expiration policy, oh, so, this makes me want to cry. I was happy before, now I'm sad. Because these are rules that are very, very bad for you. And if we look at the lexemes, the parts of passwords that are super common in the environment, it's these parts that we see. And in fact, I will not ask you to raise your hand for this part because it'll make it too easy for the person next to you to hack you. But what I'm gonna say is, some of you know you would raise your hand if I said your password starts with a capital letter. The next 2 to 6 characters will be lowercase letters. The next 2 to 4 characters will be numbers, and the last one will be an exclamation mark, right? It is, for many of you, you're going, uh-oh, right? Now, if you have a password expiration rule in your organization, there's a very good chance that the word in your password that starts with a capital letter is either a season or a month. And then the number, if not, the number represents quite possibly a year. We had a recent attack on a customer that I've recently visited. They were attacked with only 2 passwords. They were attacked with spring 2019 and winter 2019. They had a 1% penetration rate with 2 passwords across their organization. I'm not making that up, that's true, right? I would implore you to rethink the password. But we all know that passwords are terrible, right? In fact, when we look at the attacks that we see on our organization, we'll see a rather staggering penetration rate of password-based attacks. So we marked 562,000 accounts for high-risk sign-ins in January this year, okay? And those were all password derivative attacks. They were either because and this is what I usually say, your password is terrible. Either I can guess it, which I just probably did, or, right, you're going to use it somewhere else, 60% of users use it somewhere else, or you're gonna give it to me when I ask nicely, because I'm gonna tell you that there's a video behind the link. And you're I'm sorry?
Only if you have chocolate.
Okay, chocolate, so I can find chocolate. The point is that the password by itself is terrible. So then we go to MFA, and then when we do MFA, we have problems like the code doesn't get delivered, right? The phone systems are rough, and yet we know that all the attacks come in from passwords. So our response to this, right, has to be in part to get to better MFA coverage, because the reality says that it'll take a while to convert to all modern credentials. So we want better use of MFA. Currently, we have a sub 1% rate of administrators who are both registered and configured to use MFA. So all of you who are using MFA, feel good about yourselves. See, there's a correlation between smarter identity professionals and the ones who come to Ignite are clearly better. So as we look at this, one of the tools that we have to help here is to keep you from having easily guessed passwords. And the reason I'm mentioning this specifically is this is going to go to GA next week. So I'd really encourage you, if you haven't looked at this, to look at it. I'm gonna demo it in a second. We can talk about it more. The second thing that I want to talk about is passwordless options, right? And so at the end of the day, the solution here is not to make your passwords longer and longer and more complex and more complex. Let's have a infinitely long password that never leaves the device, that the user can't forget, and pretty soon you're talking crypto, right? You're not into password, your password manager starts off as a baby key store, and then eventually you get to a TPM, right, or secure enclave. And so we want to kind of get us, as an industry, get us to that place. So there are 3 major things we've been doing in that space. The first is Windows Hello. And if I wanted to demo Windows Hello, I would just lock my machine and unlock it because this machine is fingerprint censored. If you have a Surface, it's got the cameras that allow us to do facial recognition. And for everyone at Microsoft, every authentication to every resource is always strong authed, but we don't use passwords to do it. We use Windows Hello, right? So that's an option. Another option that I'm going to demonstrate in a minute is the Microsoft Authenticator app. And it's been very popular as a second factor. In a few months, it will be available in public preview as a first factor, and you can stop using passwords to sign in. And I'll show you how easy that is in just a second. And then the third one I want to talk about is FIDO, okay? And the reason FIDO is special is that everything else I can talk about, no matter how wonderful it sounds or how good the UX is, right, has this fundamental flaw, which is that it's phishable, right? I can put a screen in front of you that says, please approve the request I just sent to your phone. Please enter the code I just sent to your phone, right? Whatever the thing is I want you to do, I can make you do it, and the man in the middle can intercept that code. The difference here, the difference with FIDO is that FIDO has this little piece of magic on the bottom left called CTAP2, which is a hardware binding to the authenticating device. And what that means is that, as we would say in the lottery for the mechanics show, if you want to win the headphones, you must be present to win, right? You have to be there to actually authenticate. And there's a human gesture required as well, so that malware can't trigger the authentication. And so it's a much, much better model. And importantly, it's a standards-based model. And what that means is that we will see devices like my watch, like my phone, like a ring on your finger or a bracelet on your wrist. These factors all exist already. That can be used as authenticators. So your everyday devices that you already have, or the fingerprint reader on your existing computer, can become your authenticator. And by opening that up as a standard, we make the decision as to what to use for your strong authentication, one that the end user can do, right? So Martin mentioned the importance of this outside-in model, that if you don't have a security model that your users love, they will work around you, right? And in the early days of DRM at Microsoft, people took pictures of screens rather than using document protection, right? There's always a way around the security. You want to make sure your users can do the right thing. So FIDO is a very promising standard, and importantly, it just ratified 2 weeks ago. So it's now a standard, and we can all start, as an industry, start going after it. Okay, so quickly demoing, this is a lightning fast demo. Martin thought it was funny that I was doing live demos. He said, I never do that. So we'll see how badly or how well this goes. All right, so Martin wins that round. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna sign in. I have a teenage son who's 15. He was walking behind me while I was setting this up the other night, and he actually said, oh, can I have that? Can I have that same experience? And you can, if you're on the consumer side, in fact, set this up for your own account. If you have an Outlook account or an Xbox account, you can sign into your Xbox with your phone now. And this is the work we're doing now, is to make this available to all your enterprise users. So when we look at this, we go, we're gonna just pick the name of the user we want to go to. All right, so what's happened is you see on the screen there, I'm gonna hold you the phone, and I have to pick the same number you see on the screen, and I have to look at the phone, okay? When you're not doing it on stage, and the demo environment is not present, it's really, really easy. And the nice thing about it is that what I've done here is I have a device, it's something I have, and a biometric read, which is something I am, which means we don't have to subsequently go back and do a second factor challenge that's derivative of SMS or something like that. So this is something you can do now. It's a really good experience. We'd encourage you to start looking into the passwordless options, because ultimately you're gonna have a kind of an ongoing leak until you do that. The second thing I just want to show you, as long as we're logged in, we might as well make use of the time, is where to find password protection. And my goal here is to get you to go check it out. Now, if you're running a hybrid environment, you're running domain controllers and some sort of federation server and sync up to the cloud, you can either do this as a cloud thing, which we've actually enforced for a while. We won't let you set bad passwords in the cloud. But you can also install a password filter on your domain controllers and get that same protection there. So here we'll go down to authentication methods. And this is soon where you will also configure your FIDO stuff. And you can control the lockout thresholds, how long lockouts last, but very importantly, you can configure how your password protection works. And that's really about saying, what are the banned lexemes? What are the things that can't be in a password? right? So the word, password, right? Any of those top 1,000, we will take care of for you. So this box, this additional information, is just things that are specific to your organization, right? So if if I was in Seattle, I would say the Sounders, the Mariners, the Seahawks, the major sports teams that are there are words you cannot include in a password. We do all the substitution things, A's become at signs and S's become dollar signs. We fix all that for you, right? So you don't have to worry about that. So this is a very easy way to get your user base out of the harm's way in terms of being password sprayed, which is a dominant attack type. All right, now we go back to screen changes. Are we back? Cool. All right. Second thing I wanted to talk about is this model around zero trust. And as Martin said, it's not that we don't trust everything, it's that we verify things, right? There's a point where I stop trusting that my teenager has good grades and I actually check, right? And so, it can be disappointing if you don't ever check, or if it's too late when you check, you find out bad things have happened. So what we want to do is look at things like, traditionally we might have just verified, hey, you're on the right network. We want to look at all the elements we can look at. What are the various sensors that are in place? And if you're an Office 365 or Azure Active Directory customer, you've got a lot of sensors going, right? The ecosystem of Microsoft 365 is generating about 6.5 trillion signals a day. An awful lot of those signals are incorporated. We have 18 billion logins a day just on our team that we're assessing. And those are incorporated into risk assessments. So, how anomalous is this session? Are they in the place that they should be? Are they logging into the service they should? All those things are available to you, and it's all about protecting that data. As many of you are conditional access users, you'll know about this engine. But conditional access, basically the conditions just represent when should I fire a policy. And that's all sorts of observable elements of the login, including is it a managed device, including the location that's at, either physically as a geo-mapping thing or through known networks. There's questions of what is the service you're going to, what's the role of the users in, all these things are available to you. And then you get into the risk assessments, which is where all the data that we're bringing into the system is assessed, run through our machine learning system, and then provides a score, which allows us to then make a policy assessment. And if you're using conditional access, you've probably seen a lot of this, but it's a very powerful model. The one thing that I am particularly excited about is that when we look at the work we're doing this year in Microsoft 365, we've done some really cool work around things like bringing in endpoint signals. So we can look at Defender, says that your machine is infected, is compromised with malware. We can now use that to disconnect a session, right? We can use that to do things like pull back a Microsoft Information Protection document. So this is sort of your policy hub, right? When Martin was saying identity is sort of at the center of this, zero trust strategy, this is kind of where it comes together for us as in conditional access. Another piece of interesting work that we've done that I'm very excited about, and this was in collaboration with a team of ours that's in Israel. They built a CASB, right, which we acquired, and some of you probably know about this. It's what's called Adalom and is now called MCAS, Microsoft Cloud App Security. And this CASB can be pulled in very, very simply as an artifact of conditional access. So that if you wanted to take any third-party app and say, I want to monitor that app, I want to pick up signal from that, I want to involve that in my risk assessments, that's something you can do very, very simply. And so we can pull in those third-party apps through Cloud App Security. We're also doing a bunch of work right now around identity governance, so things like thinking about entitlement management and attestation and manager reviews and that sort of thing. One thing that's interesting and important here is that, again, over time, the intelligence that we're generating from the system will influence this. And so this is a place that there's a lot of investment, and we have the beginnings of this journey have happened, and there's some good value there, but it's going to go some very neat places as we look at bringing in all the machine learning and saying, okay, what are the roles that make sense in your organization? What are the entitlements that make sense, and how do we help you manage those? The thing I want to show you just briefly is how to turn on Cloud App Security. Once again, I go where angels fear to tread. All right, so back into AAD. And I just want to show you how easy this is. Still in the security area. I have a bias, I tend to stay in the security area for all my demos. And we'll just spin up a new policy. For the handful of you that aren't familiar with conditional access, basically all the selection criteria are in the assignments area. So what app, what user, what risk level, what device, what browser type, all the agent information. And then the controls are here under access controls. The access grant controls are where you would do things like multi-factor authentication in terms of use, blocking access, any other kind of custom flows that would stop you from getting a ticket. The session controls are where you can do cool things like say, hey, based on document classification, you can't download this in this particular environment. And so this is, again, that highly tailored adaptive authentication where we're looking at the user, the resource that they're going to, the environment they're doing it in, and actually regulating that on your behalf. Under session controls, this is the thing that's new, okay? If you were to go to use conditional access app control here and check that box, you're into now invoking our CASB. It's that easy, right? In this case, you're going monitor only. We have a few of the most common policies here, which is block and monitor, and then you can jump right into the UI to tailor your own policy if you wanted to. What's cool about this is we're going to continue to add more and more user, popular policies. And so it'll be very, very easy to invoke CASB functionality as needed rather than all the time. So if you think about the normal thing where you deploy a CASB, you might have to deploy an agent on every machine. You might have to change the proxy settings in your environment or the way that you configure access to apps. What we're doing in this case is we're actually able to do this very, very quickly. And just to show you kind of what happens, this is the standard Salesforce link, and what is going on is that when we ask for the ticket, conditional access notices that you want the CASB involved and changes the redirect URL. So I'm getting very geeky here, but and that essentially invokes the CASB without any change to the receiving application or any change to the client. So it's a deployment-free, super easy way to get CASB functionality. And so that's another thing I wanted to show you. All right, here we go. All right. One of the things that I think it's really important to understand is that you are not an island. Even though you are an identity professional and an identity security professional, you are getting benefits from all over the ecosystem, right? So we are looking at, now increasingly we're looking at pulling in signal from Office. So for example, Office phish detection is really valuable signal for knowing if you've been compromised. If you send out a bunch of phishing mails and you've never done it before, probably compromised. That now comes in, we can evaluate that as part of user risk, right? That's the kind of things that we're able to do now as we build out this Microsoft 365 ecosystem. I already talked about the Defender endpoint information. In an investigations view, you can go and see, for example, that someone had leaked credentials, signed in, set up a forwarding rule in Exchange, opened a document in a weird way, penetrated the VPN, and then did lateral movement. And I'm not going to do that demo today, but we have that. It's a real scenario that we can do. And so that kind of cross-pillar view is really, really valuable to you as far as your security team and making it really easy for you to do. So lots and lots and lots of signal feeding into this. And all of that is going to work in terms of detecting those compromised users. But it's also hard to get your head around. Right? So the next thing I want to show you and kind of talk you through is what we've just announced is a SIEM system that Microsoft has released called Sentinel. And Sentinel is cool because it's cloud hosted, it's cloud deployed, but I am really, I was in Israel in November talking to the team, and I was actually literally jumping up and down in the room when I saw the demo. I was so excited. My team, which cannot use Sentinel for reasons which will be obvious in a second, loves this tool. They really say this is the tool we would use. The problem is we don't investigate one tenant at a time. We tend to be looking at everybody all at once. So it's not an unauthenticated thing. But the tool set is the same kind of tool set, emphatically, that my team uses to run identity investigations. And so we're really excited by this tool. And you'll see some of the features in it that are really fun. But it's also super easy to use. So Sentinel essentially gives us unlimited scale. You get pre-integration with all of your Microsoft stuff, but also very, very easy integration with third-party, and I'll show you how that looks. And then we're building in more and more AI and common detection patterns into it, so that you'll be able to see, as we detect new patterns, we say, okay, that's a signal that we should be surfacing to you, and we'll have a community environment to do that. Now, this is nascent. We just released it to preview, but you can try it out at, I think it's aka.ms/Azure Sentinel. And I'm just going to go ahead and show you a few of the features of it now. All right. So this is Sentinel in terms of the way you might use it as an identity professional. And all we did is we pulled in identity protection, and we pulled in the raw identity logs and audit logs. and built this view, which is obviously over synthetic demo data. But you can see here that we have a quick at a glance of what the alerts that we are dealing with are. You can spin up a case. You can actually start a case for any of these things. So if you click into one of these, you spool a new case, and that's actually a ticketing system that's integrated so that your SOC can then pick up and investigate what happened there. And then one of the things I really like in the Sentinel environment is this, which is on the bottom right, these data source anomalies. One of the things that our investigation team does every day is that we actually go through all of the APIs that are surfaced in our identity systems, and we have an algorithm that picks up the top anomalies by volume and deviation, right? And then we always triage the top anomalies every single day. So it doesn't matter where the API was, whatever went wrong, we catch it, right? And one of the things we use is a tool just about like that, which is actually looking for the outliers and flagging where the anomaly became dangerous. They built that right into this tool, right? So as you go through and you look at what are the systems that you're monitoring, on average, I don't know about your environments, but on average, people were running 22 different security products in addition to all the stuff that we've got built in, right? And one of the things I'm hearing from customers is they kind of want to simplify that. But while you've got those investments, it's pretty cool to be able to pull that signal in. And if you wanted to pull that in, there's all kinds of great features here. I really encourage you to explore this or have your SOC team explore this. So you can spin cases, do pre-integrated dashboards, managed hunting, queries across the data in raw format. But what I'm going to show you here is the data connectors. And so in Sentinel, if you wanted to pull this up and do investigations across what's happening in your ecosystem, as a security team, pulling in the Azure Active Directory data is literally as simple as just clicking configure, and it'll pull that into your source, right? You have additionally identity protection, all the office signal, all the things I was talking about, phish detection, forwarding rule detection, all of those are coming in. Cloud app security, so when we do that monitored session, then cloud app security signal appears there as well. The endpoint protection, right? That's the on-premises detection from your domain controllers through Azure ATP. All of these signals are coming together, and they're super easy to configure. But it's not a homogeneous world, right? We actually have other tools as well. So as you kind of go down farther, you'll see things like AWS. You'll see things like Palo Alto Networks and Cisco. So depending on the security tools you have, it's still kind of one click easy to bring these tools in and start building queries and building dashboards around them. Each of these data sources will have associated with it a dashboard or a set of dashboards that you can use. And then finally, things like syslog and other DNS, like threat intelligence publishers are all there as well. So any third party, CSV files, SQL sources, any of those things can be brought in as well. So this is a tool I'd really encourage that you look at. One of the things that when we talk about a zero trust environment and kind of modernizing your identity infrastructure is really leveraging the signal you get, right? And so that doesn't, unfortunately, it doesn't stop with access control. It also, you want to take it through to where did bad things happen? And our job is to, make it easier to keep the bad things from happening. All right, so I'm going to leave you with a little call to action, and then I'm going to take questions. And I think Martin will probably take questions too, if he'll hang around. Great. So we'll see. I'm going to feel bad. He's going to get all the questions. So, so the security steps is something that I really like to encourage you to look at. What we did is we published essentially the top recommendations for improving your security posture. These are things that are derivative from our team, looking at the statistical improvements that you can make in compromise rates by taking these steps. They're all linked through. They all have nice step-by-step guides for how to do it. The second thing to look at is the Zero Trust, which has some more guidance and more documents linked. And with that, I'll say thank you very much for coming.